So you may have surmised that we're going to be talking about higher education today, and we are going to be taking an action to defend Florida's higher education system. We are currently ranked #1 in the nation for higher education by some of these publications, and one of the reasons we are is we are the lowest in America for tuition and fees in higher education, and that's really important. And I don't think we have done tuition increases in Florida, I think, for about 10 years. And so that's something that's been very, very significant. I think if you look over the last generation, academic inflation has been like way, way, way over and above anything with normal inflation. And part of the reason for that is people in my generation, when we were coming up, and people a little bit after us too, were basically told, you know, you're not going to be successful unless, you know, you go get a college degree. And while that's great to aspire to, and we want to have pathways for people, you know, you had a generation of students who went deep into debt, and many of them had degrees that weren't necessarily putting them in a position to do anything special in the economy. We had a generation of kids end up in jobs they could have at a high school with $50,000 to $100,000 in debt. And so that is not a good way to go about this. And this tragic thing of it is a lot of the loan money that would go and be available would help lead to pressure to increase tuition because they knew they could get money. And then the money they were getting with increased tuition was not improving the education outcomes, it was increasing administrative bloat. And things that really had no impact, direct impact on the quality of education. So I think that the tuition increases we've seen around the country, huge increases, massive loans, massive debt, you know, that is not the way to do it. So I'm proud in the state of Florida that we're making this affordable for people. If you are in state, going to a state university, and you have good marks in high school and test scores, you get a full tuition scholarship with bright futures. And even if you're not at that level, maybe you get 75%. So we're really making it, I think, attainable for people. You can go get a high quality education and not be $100,000 in debt. That sets people up for success. And it's not just our universities. You know, our state college system has been increasingly nimble about identifying the type of skills that are in demand and that make a difference in the economy, and then applying programs so that we're able to meet those needs. And we rely on our state colleges to do that. We've expanded things like commercial driver's license. We used to do 600 truck drivers a year in Florida. Now we're up to 3,500 we can produce a year in the state of Florida. And guess what? If you get that, you know, you're probably going to make $100,000 to start. I know you do at Walmart. I think they do $110,000 there. And there's a whole bunch of other things, nursing programs, because we know we need more nurses. All these other things that we're really proud of, but we're proud that we're doing it in a way that's attainable for people and affordable for people. We are #2 in the nation for our 2-year graduation rate. Obviously, that's a testament to our state college system. And then #4 for 4-year graduation rate. You know, the dirty little secret is a lot of these universities kind of want to incentivize you to do 5 or 6 years because, you know, they just get to pocket more tuition money. You drag it out a little bit. You know, us in Florida, we very much expect the 4-year graduation, and that's really where we try to go. So we want you in, and we have some students I know, I mean, I've got people on my staff who graduated with a bachelor's degree in like 2.5 years. And so we want to do that. Get in, get what you need, and then go get on with your life. It's really, really significant. So we're proud of all that. You know, and at the same time, I think we recognize in Florida that these institutions, you know, are not existing in a vacuum. These are not institutions that could exist without the support of the taxpayers of the state of Florida. They are funding billions and billions of dollars into these systems because we think it's important. But I think one of the things that goes along with that is if Florida taxpayers are footing the bill for this, we need to ensure that these systems are accountable to the best interests of the state of Florida and the people that you elect to oversee the budget and oversee the administration of this. there's a strain of thought that somehow, if you step on a university campus, that somehow you just do whatever you want, and even though you're funded by the taxpayers, there can be no meaningful oversight or making sure that we're focused in the proper direction. We reject that in Florida. I mean, we think not only do we have the right to ensure that the universities are pursuing the proper mission, we have a responsibility to ensure that universities are pursuing the core mission. And for us, we believe in the traditional mission of a university to pursue truth, to be able to promote rigor in academic discourse, and to prepare students to be citizens of this republic. And I know that that's not necessarily, that may have fallen out of fashion in many parts of the country, but we don't think that the purpose of universities is to impose an ideological agenda. There should be freedom of discussion, freedom of speech, and there shouldn't be an imposition of an orthodoxy. And we've just been very clear on that. And we've done things not only to make sure that we stay on track with the core mission, but also to make sure there's accountability writ large in the university. And we've enacted over the recent years a number of reforms that we think are very, very positive. One, we've actually legislative reforms so that these accreditors, and I'll talk more about those in a minute, these accrediting agencies are not the end-all be-all, that we have an ability to go seek different accreditors to make sure that we're getting the proper accreditation. And the reason why that's important is because they tie all the federal money to it. So if somebody, now granted, our university system, you don't necessarily need to take out a lot of federal loans because it's affordable, but people sometimes do, a Pell Grant, all these things. If you don't get accredited, then they will not give any of this federal aid. And so who these accreditors are, nobody really knows any of these people. Who elected them? Nobody elected them. They're just kind of existing, out there in the ether, and we're supposed to genuflect without any accountability. And so we've recognized that is not appropriate. Second, we now have in Florida all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. And I think that if you talk to people who are wise in the ways of these world, they will tell you that one of the most significant dead weight costs in a university is unproductive tenured faculty. And so, our view is this is an appropriate check and balance on trying to prevent that. On the one hand, there is a role for tenure, because we thought about, should we just not have it at all? And I was sympathetic to that, because I'm like, we can just hire people to do a good job or whatever. But we had during COVID, you had some tenured faculty at places like Stanford who were speaking out very early against lockdowns, against forced masking, against school closures. And I guarantee with the hysteria that was happening, those people would have definitely been run out of town. They would have lost their jobs, if they didn't have tenure. So I do think that there is value in that. So I think we struck the appropriate balance with what we've done, but what it's going to end up doing is it's going to provide very positive turnover. We've put in huge amount of money directly to the university presidents so that they can go out and recruit new faculty. So, you're in University of Florida, you want to go to MIT, bring somebody to come engineer, you can do it. It's almost like free agency. And so we're giving money to be able to do that. And I think that that's going to be something that's very significant. We've also done great work to ensure seamless transitions when you go from state college to university. Very important that we keep that pipeline going. We have nixed so-called DEI at universities in the state of Florida. I mean, we believe in treating people as individuals. We do not believe in divvying up, and it should be based on merit and achievement. And that's where we're going in the state of Florida. And I think a lot of states are now going to be following suit with that. We also are re-empowering our university presidents to be the final decision maker at their schools when it comes to personnel actions. And so the question is, should the faculty unions be the ultimate decider, or should the president and the board of trustees, who are really our representatives through the governor's appointments on there. And we believe it should be ultimately the president and the board, because they're accountable, at least indirectly, to the people of Florida. Faculty unions are just not accountable. And I also think, as we're striving for more intellectual diversity, the more power these faculty unions have, I think the more apt they are to force people to toe the ideological line. And so this has been, I think, a series of very positive reforms that are reorienting our higher education system, I think, in a really good direction. Now, that brings us to why we're here today, because all the things I just said, I think most people would say, make sense. I think vast majority of people would agree with it, but even if you don't agree with it, I think clearly these are reasonable policy choices that we're choosing to pursue. Well, these accreditation agencies don't believe that. They believe they know better than the people of Florida. They believe that Florida should potentially lose student aid as a result of making these types of reforms. And so the Biden administration is seeking to crack down on the state of Florida for what we are doing. And the way it works is there's accreditors, and the Department of Education approves whoever they want to be an accreditor. And then under their theory, the accreditor can serve as a veto against the entire state of Florida. That if our legislature passes, reasonable reforms, governor signs it, that they somehow get a veto of that process. And I've read the state and federal constitutions a lot, and I don't recall seeing that clause in either of those constitutions. And so we reject the idea that a totally unaccountable, unappointed, unelected accrediting agency can trump what the state of Florida is doing. And some of these things we did prior to the election, and we ran on it in the election, and this was a big part of what we did. So we have this one, the Southern SACS, they call it, Southern Accreditation Agency here, and they try to stick their beak into different things with all this. The president of SACS, is quoted as saying, "Governing boards are the ones that are responsible for ensuring the well-being of the institution, not the governor, not the legislatures, not Jane and John Citizen." And so, that's a view that really this board trumps the entire state of Florida. We reject that. And so today we're going to do something about it. It's not just that doesn't make sense to have these accreditation agencies have so much power. We believe it violates the law and the federal Constitution to allow them to exercise such power. So the Attorney General and I today are filing a lawsuit against the Biden administration, against the Department of Education, Secretary Cardona, and other plaintiffs. And we're asking the court to find this arrangement to be unconstitutional. And it's unconstitutional in a couple ways. First, you cannot take legislative power and delegate it to an unaccountable private body and let them administer that power without any type of checks and balances. And so we believe it violates what's called the private non-delegation doctrine, and we think that we're going to be right on it, because, there's over $100 billion in student aid every year that hinges on the decisions of these accreditation agencies. And yet Congress has basically just said, you do it, we're going to stay out of it. And understand why they did it, because they didn't want federal control of education. And so in some respects, I appreciate that. But on the flip side, you now have a situation where these unaccountable private bodies are wielding huge power. If you're making a decision that could affect billions of dollars of funding, that is really, really significant. And in America, you need to be accountable to somebody. And right now, they're accountable to nobody. So that's one reason we're doing. We're also saying that it violates the appointments clause of the Constitution. If this is exercising government power effectively, then people that get appointed need to be confirmed by the Senate like any other executive branch appointee. That doesn't happen here. There's no vetting whatsoever. And then finally, the spending clause, it's effectively a condition on federal spending. And while Congress can do that, they got to be explicit about it, and they're limited limited in how broadly they can do it. So we believe these are really, really strong counts. We believe that we have a great chance of succeeding in this lawsuit. Now, ultimately, what we need is a competitive market in accreditation. You know, it's one thing if there were accreditors out there and you could freely choose where you wanted to go, then I think we would be probably not even having this discussion now. But we're in a situation where that's not the case, where we're expected to go to this one accreditor, and this is an accreditor that has an agenda. And why should that agenda be our agenda? Nobody voted for that agenda. They did vote for the agenda in the legislature and what we've signed into law. So I think it's important because it shapes how our institutions of higher education operate. And so often they have to do things to please accreditors. And so if the accreditors really want to move the institutions in one way, right now, they basically have the authority to do it. And so we're going to put a stop to that, and we're going to make sure that ultimately our institutions are going to be governed by the best interest of the people and the best interest of the state. And when you're forking over billions of dollars as taxpayers for these institutions, you have every right to ensure that there's adequate accountability and that these institutions are pursuing the mission that the people of this state believe in. And so we're taking that step today, and I think we're going to be successful, and I think that this will really open up the floodgates for more innovation in higher education. I think that you could have really great competing accredited bodies, and I think that that's something that all states should have access to. So this is the first step in that, but I think we're going to end up seeing it, and within the next couple years, I think we're going to see this accreditation cartel basically come crumbling down and more freedom in higher education reigning supreme. So that will be a good thing for this country.